Christopher Miller was a man who never lost his cool. In his 30-year career in archaeology, he had seen everything from the ruins of ancient civilizations to deep caves filled with secrets. However, none of his experience prepared him for what he would find in the abandoned village of Ravenford, lost in the northern part of England. The small village was located at the foot of the hills, shrouded in a thick, constant haze that gave it the appearance of a ghost town frozen in time. Christopher came to Ravenford on a tip from one of his colleagues, who claimed that ancient burial sites could be found there, untouched by people for centuries. No one had lived in the village for several decades, and locals told eerie stories of strange disappearances and mysterious phenomena that happened at night. At first glance, the village looked abandoned. Houses with slanted roofs and boarded-up windows stood like silent sentinels surrounded by overgrown gardens. The sun was hidden behind gray clouds, and the light seemed weak, barely penetrating the thick curtain of fog. Christopher was a skeptic, more interested in the possibility of finding artifacts than rumors of ghosts. But as he explored the village, he began to have a strange feeling that he was not alone. Every step he took echoed in the empty streets, but he always felt as if someone was watching him. He stopped in front of an old building that had once been a church. The stone walls were touched by time, but the tower still stood, towering over the village like a silent observer. There was Latin text carved above the door, but some of the words were erased, and the rest were almost illegible. However, Christopher could read one word: veritas, which meant truth. Truth, he muttered under his breath, approaching the doors and pushing them. They creaked, opening inwards. The inside of the church was damp and dark. The pews had long since rotted, and the altar was covered in a thick layer of dust. But the strangest thing was that there were no usual symbols of religious rites here. The walls were decorated with strange symbols, reminiscent of ancient runes. Christopher felt uncomfortable, but his curiosity overcame his fear. He took out a flashlight and began to examine the room. The walls were covered not only with runes but also with images of some kind of creatures humanoid, but with distorted faces and disproportionate bodies. The more he looked at these images, the more they disturbed him. In the corner of the altar area, he noticed a staircase leading down to the basement. Without thinking, Christopher decided to go down. The stairs were narrow and winding, the air growing colder. With each step he took, he felt the darkness closing in around him, and the lantern no longer gave off enough light to illuminate the way forward. Descending, he found himself in a small chamber, the walls of which were decorated with the same runes and images as above. However, in the center of the room stood an altar, and on it lay a strange stone object, similar to an ancient tablet. Christopher carefully approached the altar and shone the lantern on the tablet. It was carved with text in a language he did not recognize, but in the middle was one phrase, highlighted among the other symbols. "Shadows beyond the horizon await." He examined the tablet carefully, but suddenly felt an icy gust of wind pass through the chamber. He turned around, but there was nothing there, only darkness. But the darkness seemed to breathe, move, as if it were alive. Christopher took a step back, his heart pounding. He realized that something was wrong here. There was no time in this place, no life, and something was waking up. As he walked back to the stairs, he heard a sound that made him stop. It was a quiet, almost inaudible whisper, but it came from all directions. The words were inaudible, but the voice was ancient and full of pain. The whispers grew louder, the walls seemed closer, and the darkness thickened around him. Christopher rushed to the stairs, but each step was difficult, as if the air had become thick and viscous. When he finally ran outside, the church seemed more ominous to him than before. The windows looked at him like the empty eye sockets of the dead, and the tower seemed to move, like a living thing watching him. A strong gust of wind swept through the village, and Christopher felt the cold, damp air on his skin. He ran back to the car parked at the entrance to the village, but when he reached it, he saw that a strange message had appeared on the windshield. It was scratched into the glass with a sharp object, and it read, "You have come too far. They see you." His heart sank. How could this be? There was no one around. Someone or something had been following him since he entered this village. In a panic, he tried to start the car, but the engine showed no signs of life. The battery was dead. although everything had been fine before. The night began to fall quickly, and with each passing minute the darkness became denser. Christopher knew that he had to leave, but the village did not let him go. It was as if it was pulling him back. Its empty streets became a labyrinth, and the houses the guards of his prison. He tried to contact his colleagues on the radio, but it did not work either. It was as if some force was jamming all signals. In desperation, he decided to go back to the church, hoping to find some clues there. When he returned to the building, the doors were open, although he clearly remembered that he had closed them when he left. Christopher went inside, and this time the darkness in the church was almost tangible. He felt its presence. The voices began to sound around him again, but now they were louder and clearer. These were not just whispers, these were screams, groans of suffering and pain. He was surrounded by shadows that moved with such speed that they seemed barely perceptible. And then he saw her, a figure in black, standing at the altar. Her face was hidden under a hood, but her eyes glowed with an icy light. She looked at him, and with every step she came closer. "You found them," she said in a voice that tore his mind apart. "Now they will find you." And at that moment the church disappeared, and Christopher found himself in a vast empty space where there was no time or place. Shadows surrounded him, and in their eyes he saw eternity.